Chapter 34. If the rishis of the Golden Age have stressed over and over again the dangers of passing on to the next life with desires remaining unfulfilled, lest we be forced to reincarnate yet again for the sole purpose of fulfilling them, they have paradoxically also stressed the inherent value to be found in attaining a state of desirelessness before we depart from this earth at all. And so it was not without a sizable measure of relief that the barrel-chested monastic with the Gallic accent learned of the true nature of Jean Noel's problem over a cup of chamomile tea and a peanut butter cookie in the kitchen of the Windmill Chapel. "I don't want to be a dentist anymore," a far from composed Jean Noel let it be said, as he had just barely brought a steaming cup of tea successfully to his lips, and then with an unsteady hand had sent it clattering back into its saucer again. "I can't help it. I seem to have lost all earthly desire for it," he added self-disparagingly. "What better thing is there that a person could possibly lose?" the unfazed monk rejoined matter-of-factly. "But I must warn you, should you find yourself unable to lose all your earthly desires entirely, then by all means strive to fulfill your noble ones before you leave. What is it, if I may ask, that you would desire to do instead?" "Move to Big Sur," Jean Noel replied, while bracing himself erectly and shutting his eyes tightly, as if he had been about to face the unavoidable retribution of a firing squad. "And?" the monk bemusedly inquired, while shooting nothing but a harmless and disarming smile in the boy's direction. "That's part of the problem," Jean Noel revealed gingerly, sensing with cautious optimism that the ordeal was turning out to be far less painful than he had previously anticipated. "I don't know yet. Maybe wash dishes until I figure it out, or even be a jack of all trades." "Honest livings, both of which I commend," the monk noted philosophically, while dipping a peanut butter cookie into his tea. "And what is there to prevent fulfillment of this surely modest and far from ignoble desire?" At that point, Pavlova and the little black cat had both slipped in through the slightly open door. The ballerina had, without thinking, helped herself to a peanut butter cookie. Upon realizing that in her present state she could not greedily devour it, as had been her original intent, she had merely rolled her eyes in momentary exasperation at this desire forced to go unfulfilled and turn her attention to the matters at hand. The monk had meanwhile risen to pour a saucer of milk for the expectant feline. "Alice," Jean Noel answered in a muffled whisper. Although still oblivious to Pavlova's presence, he was nevertheless glad of the cat's untimely interruption, and hoped that no one else in the room had heard him utter the name. These hopes would prove, however, to have been in vain, for the muffled whisper had most assuredly not fallen on deaf ears. Pavlova immediately arched a suspicious eyebrow, and then agilely perched herself on the table's edge to hear more. The little black cat leapt neatly onto Jean Noel's lap once more, and emitted a questioning yowl in the process. The monk merely echoed Jean Noel's reply inquisitively by repeating, "Alice?" and then added coaxingly, "How so?" "Isn't it obvious?" Jean Noel argued bitterly. "I'd be dragging her away from all that she holds dear. Her best friend, her goddaughter, her biology classes, her beloved basement apartment in the Sovereign Hotel. And for what? I'm a failure now with nothing to offer her in exchange." Jean Noel had concluded harshly, but then added, after a moment of wry reflection, "Except for a significantly better view, I suppose." "Never underestimate the importance of a better view," the monk sagely interjected. "If I were you, young man, I would put the proposition before her and hear what Alice herself has to say about it. You never know, dear boy. You might even be pleasantly surprised." At that, Pavlova began to At that, Pavlova began to clap her hands enthusiastically and nod her head in favor while the little black cat commenced to purr loudly in solidarity. Having learned but 2 days prior that the eccentric gentleman who had appeared in Jean Noel's hospital room and made the young man such a scandalously extravagant offer had not, in fact, been a total stranger at all, but the boy's actual father had placed the offer in an entirely different light and had filled Pavlova with remorse. Unwittingly, she had steered Jean Noel wrong, and he had listened to her. But now, satisfied that the record had been set straight, with the help of the barrel-chested monastic with the Gallic accent, she determined that her services were no longer needed, and hence rose to go, but not before removing the handsome timepiece to which she had constantly referred to during this ordeal. She had constantly referred during this earthly ordeal from her wrist. Winking slyly at the monk, she then surreptitiously slipped into the pocket of Jean Noel's red corduroy bathrobe, whence she had originally found it 3 days prior in his hospital room. Later that evening, when checking pockets prior to executing a quick load of laundry before bed, Alice determined that it would remain one of the enduring mysteries of her life as to how the 1920s Art Deco Rolex wristwatch she had lost only 3 days prior at the municipal swimming pool at Santa Monica College, or so she thought, could have ever wound up there. Meanwhile, Jean Noel could only surmise with mounting dread what Alice's reaction would be to the monk's suggestion, which he had nevertheless promised himself that he would put forward to her on that self-same afternoon, when she returned from rendering service to the divine on Sunset Boulevard. He would ask her then if she would even remotely consider giving up her accustomed existence at the Sovereign Hotel and moving on an as yet unseen property in Big Sur, with a hothouse for growing orchids, a tack house for raising horses, and even a rustic goat house, where once upon a time, and under the strangest of circumstances imaginable, he himself had been brought into this world.